Do you think that if I sing songs, do you think that we owe rights to them, or like we could be sued, or do I have to be
Anything is
so
theoretically
accurate?
possible.
Yeah,
I would
anything is
almost be
possible.
happy to be sued. That means that the lawyers are all listening,
Nice.
except unless Charlie Fiction tipped them.
Yeah,
off.
Charlie Fiction's
Then
always listening.
We got a snake in the grass, bro. We gotta watch out.
It's coming from inside the house. All right. I wish I knew how to make this work right now. Interesting. This is an interesting issue. Riverside won't let me press play on our theme song, so we might have to go without it. Oh, that's why. There you go. You're in lockstep with it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Soccerwise Tuesday edition. David Goss, Tom Bogert here, your favorite two-man band out there. We're going to play all of the hits here today. We've got Tom on vocals and on background, drums, maybe a little bass guitar from you.
Yeah, I'll shred.
You'll shred.
I'll shred.
Slap it a bass. And then I'll be your lead singer at times, but other times I'll probably be percussion section. I played the alto saxophone, which was probably a useless thing to have practiced and done in my life.
Were you good?
I was fine. I didn't practice very much. So I got worse as everyone else got better.
That tracks.
Yeah.
I did the trombone in my Catholic elementary school.
You're a boner.
I was awful. I picked it because it was an instrument that was almost larger than me, and everybody else did drum. I was like, dude, I'm never. Even as a 10-year-old, I was like, bro, I'm never gonna do this. I could do hot cross buns really poorly, and then when after 5th grade, I was like, please don't make me do this.
I can play Pomp and Circumstance, which is the graduation song. And when you learn how to play it, you learn how to play it like it's a loop, basically. Okay. So in the graduation, you just play it over and over and over again. And anytime I go to a graduation, it's like I get I can feel it at the base of my neck being like, uh-oh, I got to keep playing. I got to keep playing. I got to keep doing it. It is the only thing I could still play probably out there. You had a musical weekend, though. A little music festival for you out on the beach. You were Jersey to the core this week.
See here now in Asbury Park, New Jersey, I could, walk from my apartment. It was beautiful. Just taking in music on the beach. You had Bruce Springsteen descending on the town that he made famous, his home. It was the king returning, a little bit like Carlos Vela to LAFC, to try to put in the side of thing. But I got to tell you, it was incredible. Just standing on the beach, listening to Bruce just shred for several hours. I'm not a huge music festival person in that, I don't know what is normal and what is abnormal. It's not normal for the headliner to be playing for 3.5 hours, right?
No, that's longer than normal at a music festival.
It's Bruce, baby. And he was even talking at the end of the show, it's there's ordinances in from there and the Stone Pony.
You gotta shut it down.
Yeah, and he's just I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure
we're not going anywhere.
If the chief of police was probably there. They have
chief of police.
He or she
rolls in a
Bruce
Springsteen T-shirt.
Yeah,
and it's
probably
just
go ahead.
Shit.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. And he did a couple. He did a surprise show at the Stone Pony, just an iconic music venue that he broke through at in New Jersey the night before. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but getting to hear Bruce on the beach, all that other stuff. Just awesome weekend.
Does he not always? Is this not a festival that always happens that he always performs?
So this is the first time he's performed at it. It's every year.
Okay.
But there is some conspiracy theories that apparently this is not that makes it sound bad. Apparently this is the last year that this specific town has the rights to this music festival. And that it's is Bruce playing? Does that mean that it's gonna go somewhere else next year? Does Bruce know that this is his, that he can close down the show here in Asbury Park? And we're not. But I hope not, because I loved it.
Were you tempted to just make it the wedding? Bruce on the beach, just do it in the crowd, and then be like, this was our anniversary. This is what we do.
It's funny, our wedding is, I don't know, 3 blocks from where we were standing on the beach listening to Bruce. And our band is going to probably be playing a decent amount of Bruce. And I'm going to have to sneak in some emails about Grateful Dead songs that I'm sure my fiance has not told them to play. And then, we'll be good.
Each song will just take the whole wedding, so you only have to pick 1 or 2 at best, and then you can. Do you know that my first date with my wife was at a Dead and Co. show.
Yeah, but when you told me that, I was like, how did I not know this?
And we
it's
don't
not-
like.
Yeah, it was like
she likes them less than I do. She likes John Mayer, and she was 80% of the crowd, which thought they were going to a John Mayer concert. And we went with a friend who kept playing Grateful Dead at this like pre-party that we went to, and people kept changing it to John Mayer. And he looks at me and my friend and goes, "All of these idiots think they're going to a John Mayer concert. They're going to hate it, and I'm going to love watching them hate it." And it was class. It was such a great moment, and it's what I always remember. And of course, it's the reason we're together now. So shout out to
that's beautiful.
to Tom and the Dead going forward. I'm glad you had a great weekend. Nice. Just pure coincidence. This was not planned. We did not know. If you are listening, by the way, Tom just showed his Grateful Dead hat to me. I did not know that was going to happen. So it's just, I guess I can assume it with you every single time. I'm glad you had a good weekend. It was a wild weekend of MLS action. Of course, we talked about the big rivalry games. We'll recap them. They were more wild than anyone maybe could have even anticipated. As we go along, we've got a bunch of news actually coming out of California on top of El Trafico. Charlie Candle on his way back, so light him up if you are an LAFC fan, and as many ways as you want to take that. And then San Diego bringing in their officially head coach Mikey Varas, which we talked through a little bit when the rumors came out, but you've got some more details about it, and now we can really dig into it as we go along. We might apologize for some things we have said, maybe. I'm just putting the maybe there in all caps because I will not commit to it. And of course, we've got midweek MLS action. Wednesday night games in Major League Soccer. They are consequential for the playoff race. They are less consequential for the Shield race, as we will talk about in just a moment. There is a weird schedule, Tom. I went through it to be like, oh, here are the games to preview. And it's like, in a league where 97% of teams make the playoffs, it is shocking how few like decent matchups there are on this Wednesday night, which actually makes them, unfortunately for fans, more important because there's a lot of like, you cannot lose games. You have nothing to gain, but you have a lot to lose if you lose this match.
Yeah, it's a tough slate when you open up with, finding, like, I'm trying to catch up from the weekend, of course, because I missed a decent amount from being at the festival. So that I'm trying to catch up, and it's like, all right, got a good handle on everything, read stuff, watched as much as I could, all that, and then it's like, all right, cool. Oh my God, there's more games Wednesday. It's all never ending, and you're always like just trying to take a breath of air. And then it's like, all right, let's look into the games, and it's like, oh Jesus, there's nothing this week. So we had a good weekend this weekend. Midweek is going to be for the sickos, and thus I'm expecting some pleasant surprises in that when your expectations are the lowest.
That's
a Wednesday in September with this like kind of crap looking fixture list. I think it's going to be great. I'm just going to go out on a limb.
Let's be real. Patrick Ajiman is going to score a hat trick. It's going to be my favorite day of the season. In the West, there are only two matchups that have both playoff teams are matching up. It's the Galaxy versus Portland, and it's Houston against Vancouver. Again, 97% of teams qualify for the playoffs, and somehow that occurred in the Western Conference. I'm sure I'm missing one, but that's basically how it's broken down, and it is absolutely bizarre. But we will dig into it as we go along in this show. Let's start with the weekend that was, of course, because I think I said 2 weeks ago, I was like, every single week we are going to do your recap for the weekend. We're going to tell you the biggest matches, everything that went down, who's in, out, playoffs, who's out, who had the big wins. I forgot about that immediately and texted you and was like, what do you want to do on this show? And you're like, what about all the categories you made? So now we are back on the categories. So we start with the best match of the weekend. Tom, this is a no-brainer. Normally we'll each put one and we'll bounce off each other. It would be hard to put a second match in there. You went through the stats on Thursday. El Trafico always delivers. Goals, opportunities, back and forth, blah, blah, blah. I think this is the best one ever. Maybe the Zlatan thing is unique, but I think this is the best game we've ever seen with the most insanity.
Look, yeah, it was really good. There's nothing that is going to be more insane ever than the Zlatan Ibrahimovic debut. So I think I'm just going to put that to bed for myself. That doesn't take anything away from how awesome this game was and how much fun and how wild and how many different angles you can go. We can start with, hey, Galaxy, did you learn anything from the previous losses to LAFC at the beginning? The obvious issues of Denny Bouanga in transition, losing the ball in bad spots, all everything that you would write down as a game plan for LAFC was happening in the first half. And it's like, oh my God, they did this again. Are they, in these current iterations, are they ever going to get over this hump? So that could be the first talking point. But the more obvious one is 4 goals in the second half, incredible comeback, some incredible goals, awesome atmosphere, and just a wild game. The Galaxy proved a lot of doubt. Like at halftime, I was like, okay, like we don't need to take the Galaxy seriously in the playoffs. Like that's how far out I was. And it's like, because if they're doing this today, after this has already happened twice this year in this exact way, Danny Bouanga didn't get any slower. He didn't get any worse at finishing. And and LAFC did not change their tactics on how to try to exploit the Galaxy's weakness. And at halftime, when they're down 2-0, it's like, all right, like they're just never going to learn. Like this is what it is. And then it was an incredible comeback in the second half. All of their strengths rather than their weaknesses kind of came to light. All of those wonderful attacking players. Dejan Joveljic was really, really good as well. Again, Ricky Puig doing Ricky Puig things. It was a really important win for the Galaxy. One that I think we're going to look back on just in the lore of El Tráfico, as you said, and one, but like another we could be looking back on when we get to the playoffs. And it's like, hey, was that the moment where it was like, oh yeah, like this is going to be an apex contender in the West? Whereas at halftime, I was all the way out.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It was a ridiculous match. It was a ridiculous match, like you said, because the Galaxy basically did all the things they do, both in the negative and the positive. And that ends up being a 4-2 game. Like that's how the Galaxy are built. They are built to give up chances and score chances and create chances. You don't expect to see that momentum shift though. And I think the Galaxy come out of this game and they feel a little bit more weathered. Like, okay, you could trust this team to bounce back now. You could trust this team in big moments. You come out of that halftime locker room and it's like you're down 2-0 to your rival at home, opportunity to win the West, but more importantly, like this is the game you build up to. Everyone's watching you. You have now pooped the bed to open things up. You've embarrassed yourself, and like the same exact players. It wasn't even, oh, we're going to make changes. Like it was the same players that walked back on the field and sort of found it within them to turn it around. That's a huge moment for the Galaxy. Like you said, I think I was as far out. I don't know that I've come as far back in on them as maybe other people have out of this performance. We'll talk about that coming up in a little bit. But it was Greg Vanney leaning in as well, saying, I'm going to start Marco Royce and Ricky Puig as my central midfield too, in front of Edwin Cerrillo.
Poor, bro, you saw that starting 11, like, oh, it's like, oh my God, thoughts and prayers for Edwin Cerrillo, his legs, his lungs, his heart, his mental, everything, like what he was going to have to do behind those two players, those two wonderful attacking players, but that's defending for 3.
Yeah. And then you add in, oh yeah, also by the way, like Mickey Imane doesn't really defend. And it's like, cool, Edwin Cerrillo, feel free to play 15 positions in this game. And that's what we saw over the first 45 minutes. And so if you should go read Doyle's article, as you should every single week. He breaks things down as well as anyone. He talked a little bit about the shifts, but the shifts were the same personnel. And I think that's what's really surprising to me. I think that's the tip of the cap to the players and to Vanney, saying like, okay, it's not always individual changes that have to change. And like, go and watch the goals. Marco Royce slide tackles multiple times to win the ball in the open field to help set up chances. Both of them working harder than they have in the past to help keep things connected and to hang on. And then I think the momentum shift when Joveljic scores his goal and it just lifts everyone. And you're watching that game and you feel like LAFC are in trouble, and yet they're up 2-1 on the road against their opponent. And like it just had this weird moment where LAFC for now years, you've always thought, okay, well, they'll get that one in transition. Like what we felt about, I think, the Sounders from 2014 to 2019, right? Of like, oh, they'll figure this out at some point, and like you're going to have to keep opening up to try and win and try and create, and it's going to kill you at some point. And it didn't. I think there's a few things there. I mentioned this on yesterday's recap show, which I do every Monday. It's also our mailbag show, so if you want to be a part of that, join the Patreon. You get into the Discord. You can chat with us. We're going to be in there, of course, all of Wednesday night, talking all through the NWSL weekend, and that's where we get the mailbag from. But I was talking about this one, and in saying it, I have zero idea where I was going with that. I went into read mode immediately, and I have no idea where I was going with my point.
Did you say something on yesterday's show that you wanted to reiterate?
Yeah, and I have no idea what it was. But shout out to the Galaxy for their big comeback and for their big victory. And it's a huge moment in the course of this season. It's a huge moment for this team. No pain still in this one. Didn't really matter. I think, again, it shows the, like, how do all these guys start? There's four. They're rarely ever all going to be healthy. And if they are healthy, it looks like Marco Reus is going to play central midfield. And, like, that's the decision. And it worked for the Galaxy in this one.
Yeah, and like so doubling down on what you're really good at versus trying to cover up weaknesses. I think that's going to be the philosophical debate and decision making for Greg Vanney and this LA Galaxy team. And to your point, like again, at halftime it was kind of like let's double down. And the second half was incredible, and I think that's going to serve as a proof of concept that like the archetype of what you would do against the Galaxy is LAFC. LAFC are the top end of that transition, kill you with pace, be difficult to kind of break down. And again, with Bouanga and all their other attacking talent, that is the best version of that style against you. So having Ricky Puig and Marco Reus, like, yeah, again, they gave up 2 goals in the first half. Puig had a goal and 2 assists. Marco Reus had 2 assists. Like, that's how you draw it up. Dejan Jovic scored twice. Gabriel Peck, maybe on another day, he has a couple goal contributions. Diego Fagundes wasn't really involved in the game, and he's probably the 6th out of those 6 guys, right? Like, Joseph Painto, maybe he's the one starting opposite Gabriel Peck. Or, again, if you kind of tweak it where Marco Reus goes up there, and then you have Mark Delgado or Gaston Brugman playing in the midfield with Cerrillo, or any combination of that. So, I really do respect the, like, hey, we're not going to adapt to them. Like, It's, again, all of this is much easier to say in hindsight, and I want to preface that, and that's why I started this negative of, like, at halftime, it's like, why were you surprised? Like, was there no adjustments made? But, like, in hindsight after the win, like, I do respect that, like, no, screw it. Like, we're just going to be the best at what we do really good. And instead of focusing on how can we cover up weaknesses, say, screw it, let's lean into our strengths and try to just throw a fastball and beat them that way.
So the place I was going before I got lost was I've seen the LAFC fans talk about Denny Bouanga's travel and like throwing the final nail in that coffin by him being elite for 90 minutes and him really only being there for 40 to 45 minutes. I think some of that's fair, right? I think on a different day, LAFC wins this 3-1, and like that's the story. And so I think for LAFC, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately for all of us, of like the way they're going to choose to play the game and the way they're going to choose to handle big games, is I think they still walk away saying like we are who we are, and we could have won that game, and we should have won that game. And I don't think they change that. But as you said, for the Galaxy, the leaning in, this is the Columbus conversation. Like, this is literally what we talked about with the mailbag question from last week of why is it okay for Columbus to give it up playing out of the back and just laugh, but not okay for other teams? It's like, well, they're fully committed to how they play, and that is what allows them to be successful. The Galaxy don't have the ability to sit in and defend. If they choose to do that, they're going to lose. And in this game, obviously, once it's 2-0, there's no point in doing it for you. The question now is, can they be so elite at it that with their deficiencies, they're going to beat everyone? And I think the door is open for that. Like, that's a genuine opportunity. I mentioned yesterday, Houston looks really good over the last 2 weeks. A matchup between the two of them would be fascinating to watch because they're both committed to the same idea.
Yeah, and then on the other end of that, of like Colorado does, like they have a lot of, I guess, similarities in how they want to play, just again, even in the basic terms of with the ball or against the ball. They want to play against the ball. They want to play in transition. They want to win duels. They want to transition quick. Like, that is in the similar mold of LAFC. If again, we're going to be as simplistic as possible in like possession versus not possession, right? Like, so there are going to be like looking at the Western Conference, and I know we're going to talk about the East at some point here, but like the way that like the top of the East again with Miami, Columbus, and Cincy is stronger, I think, than LAFC, LA Galaxy in the West. But like 1 through 8 in the West is straight up awesome, and like we're at a point where we're watching like the middle tier of the East just look awful, straight up. Like a lot of these teams aren't looking like playoff teams, right? Meanwhile, out West, like you give me any combination of these top 8 teams, or 9 even with Minnesota because they're playing better, right? Like whoever gets it through that play-in game, any combination of these 8 teams, I'm gonna watch and I'm gonna be super fascinated by, right? And one more point on the play styles in the top of the West and everything, like. I agree with LAFC, they could walk away from this and be like, I don't know how we didn't win. We should have won. Use whatever, like, you know, hey, Bouanga, like, shout out Andrew Weeby on Extra Time. This is why he's the GOAT, is that he was bringing, like, he looked up exactly what a travel day back from Gabon to Los Angeles would be. And he's like, it was like 48 hours and multiple layovers and flight changes. Like, yeah, like, that's a big part of what happened here.
Yeah.
But on the other side, like, the other side of this now is because of this, the LA Galaxy are in total control to be hosting that game if they do get the Western Conference Final, right? And it's not a foregone conclusion. The Galaxy still have 5 games left. LAFC have 2 games in hand while they're 7 points behind. So I'm very excited to see how this all plays out. But, like, it's a lot different to play at home in a Western Conference Final than it would be going on the road. So, like, I think both sides can take positives from this. Both sides can say, yeah, no, we're going to beat them if we play them in the playoffs. And it's just really fascinating to me, just like on any given day, how these things can all happen.
I have a question for you that I didn't prep you on, and I want you to think about the way you answer it because it will be clipped and it will be replied to in a little bit on social media. Is Ricky in the MVP conversation? How much does he have to do? So he's got 10 goals and 13 assists for the number 1 team in the Western Conference right now. Reminder, he will watch this, he will read it, and then he will reply to it after their game on Wednesday night, I think against Portland. Is he top 3 for you? Can he be top 3? What would he have to do?
That's a great question. So I think that he's going to be somewhere in that like 3 to 5 range. Like, I think that this is going to mirror like an NBA conversation in that, you know,
yes, James Harden toxic conversation.
No, not in the way of like, yeah, I think he should be in the conversation because he's absolutely deserved that, and that in and of itself is an awesome thing and should hang his hat on. And I say that and I go so positive on the front end of like, no, I don't think that he has a real chance to win it. And that's not a slight in any way. Okay, you were the 4th best player of all of the players in Major League Soccer over an entire season. Like, that's not a slight. I just don't think that, like, again, this is going to be a counting stat kind of thing. And it comes to available. It's like obviously team success plus the counting stats. I don't know if Ricky Puig will have the numbers in the end there. Like, and hell, Lionel Messi has more goal contributions than he does. And Messi has played, you know, a third of the games. And, like, again, that's not a him to Puig thing. But, like, there are several players ahead of him with more goal contributions than him. Again, I think that he's one of the most singular players. Like, I'm going to say this offhand without really thinking about best 11. But, like, I can't imagine I'm not going to vote him for best 11. Like, he is one of the handful of very best players in MLS this year. And he should be in the conversation. But in the conversation is where it ends for me, right? Like, so where it comes to like NBA is like, and we have a podcast, right? We're filling time to talk about these topics. Like, think about in the NBA, like DeMar DeRozan has a sick December, and it's like, is he in the MVP conversation? It's like, okay, yeah, and now what, right? Like, and again, like that's all a positive thing, and these players should be getting recognized for how well they're playing. But I'm not just gonna be like, oh yeah, he had an awesome game, the biggest game of the weekend. Automatically, yep, let's do that. Like, I think that he's slightly behind the other guys, which, again, is still an accomplishment.
This is actually an odd year just because, I mean, Messi's probably going to win it while playing like 7 games because he's Messi and he's going to put up the stats anyway and, like, Miami's going to win. I don't know that Suarez is going to win it. And so, like, votes are going to be all over the place. Obviously, last week, everyone was having the Cucho Lucho conversation. We've talked about Evander in the convo as well. Gabriel Peck's got 11 goals and 10 assists. But Ricky's got a goal in the last 2 games coming off the Leagues Cup break. And, like, if he goes on a heater and a tear here and they win the West and run away with the West, I think he will be a top 3 finalist.
Yeah, that's a good shot.
And you're right in, like, the accounting stats matters. I think the team might be set up in a way in which he doesn't now. Like, it might be, okay, you come out of the break with Royce there, you know, fully engaged, Peck healthy, Joveljic healthy. Like, yeah, Ricky might put up, over the last 7 games, he might put up 7 goals, 7 assists. Like, he might be able to do that. But yes, it will be necessary to get in there. The other thing is if the Galaxy stretch this thing, normally people are going to look at team and star and say, who are the top teams? Who are the top stars? Who gets into this conversation? I don't know if he was in it before. Shout out to Morgan Tenza, who's going to clip this and throw it out there for us. And Ricky's going to tell us if he's in it or not going forward. So a big moment for this team, a big win for them. As I said, I think one of the best games we've ever seen in this rivalry. It continues to deliver. I talked about Houston Galaxy. I mean, you want El Trafico in the playoffs. Like, there's not a game you want more in a moment like that. It's delivered in the postseason in the past, even though we've had it very rarely. And it has the potential to do it again. Let's go into our other categories. Let's talk about biggest win for the playoff push. I feel strongly about this one, so I'll start.
Yeah, you go.
And I will say Minnesota's win over St. Louis. I talked a little bit about this game yesterday. Minnesota goes down 1-0 on the road. They get Pereira in the starting lineup. They get Yeboah in the starting lineup together. It is a huge moment for this team. And I thought Yeboah was like unplayable in the second half. And Bongi's able to put a couple of the chances away. You get the penalty kick. You get an own goal forced by Yeboah. But it was a huge moment, I think, for Minnesota because it's not about this year for them completely.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is building towards the future. This is year one of a build. You'd like to make the playoffs year one, and you'd like to do it off the back of the guys that you think are the future, right? You don't want a situation here where you're like, well, the team's better if Yeboah's not starting, if Tanny's starting or Pookie's starting. Do we keep forcing him in just so that he gets settled and gets ready? They don't have to make that decision anymore. They don't have to have that conversation. You could see the bones of some of what will work because Robin Ludd's going to have a ton of freedom in this group. You're going to have some interchange across the front 2 or 3. You allow some of the players, I think, to play to their strengths. Bongi can stay out wide. Sangbin, if he's in there, can stay out wide and be isolated and things like that. I thought there was a lot of good that came and a lot of good against a tough team. Like St. Louis are at the bottom of the standings. That's not St. Louis. We've talked about them a ton on this show because they have been genuinely competitive. They have improved. Klaus back in the starting lineup. And so I think Minnesota had the biggest we can make a playoff push win over the course of this weekend.
Yeah, I do like this answer as well, and particularly given that they're playing. So, like, not only does this vault Minnesota, like, pretty firmly in, like, it'd be a huge disappointment now if they don't hang on to at least that 9th spot. Like, now the conversation becomes, can they get to 8th? Can they host the play-in game? They're 1 point behind Portland right now, but they're 5 points cushion with the playoff line. So this was a huge performance. It was a game on the road at St. Louis that St. Louis knew that they had to have. St. Louis gets a goal 4 minutes in. All of that recipe is perfect for sweet. Like, all the momentum. Oh, my God. Like, here comes St. Louis. Are they going to catch Minnesota? Are they going to, like, really make a push? So the duality of they kind of firmed up where they are. And, like, St. Louis, they're cooked. That's it. It's over. And this is the story of St. Louis this season, man. They go up 1-0. They have 25 points dropped from winning positions. That's most in MLS. That's just not good enough. And like, I think the conversation about regressing to the mean and everything else, like, before the season, I didn't think it was going to be this hard, but, like, this is how it manifests itself. And, like, these are the games that they were picking up points from losing positions, or they were extending their lead and stuff like this, where it's like, I don't know if this is repeatable. And it's a big disappointment for St. Louis, given that, like, this team, on the face of it, like, as they are currently constructed now, solid team. But even go look back at it, like, they've had some of these, like, Marcel Hartle, I don't believe, debuted that first chance, but, like, still, in their last 6 games after the transfer window opened, they have 1 win. One of the ties was 4-4 at Portland, that epic game where they gave up multiple goals in stoppage time. Like, that's 2 points dropped there. This game, like, they were winning. Like, that could have been 5 points right there, and they would be making the playoffs if they didn't throw away so many games. So it's disappointing on St. Louis's side, and, like, that closes the book on them, and, like, Minnesota can take a deep breath and exhale.
And I would say for Minnesota, the game plan here, which I think a lot of it as the game went along was their ability to suck St. Louis a little bit higher and then play into transition and allow Yeboah to get 1v1 and get into space. And I thought they played out of tight space as well into open space and over the top. You've now got Cincinnati, SKC, and Colorado in your next 3. Like, you can keep the game plan. You don't really have to change things up for those 3 matchups, right? Those are 3 teams. SKC, they're just open and they're a mess. The other 2 are going to press high, and they're going to try and press you. They're going to try and create chances with it, and you've now got this option over the top that can threaten them. So you're either going to have those teams say, actually, we have to come a little bit deeper and come out of a mid-block and not expose ourselves and open up the space over the top as much, or they go for it and you've got opportunities. And I think you've got a finisher who's capable of doing some special things in Yeboah, which I'm genuinely really excited about his ability in this league and, like, what he can bring to this team. And I think you see some of the other pieces starting to come together for them and a little bit of confidence. So if you're a Minnesota fan, I think you should be excited because it feels like there's a plan and it feels like it's taking steps forward after what's been kind of a rough year or so of just chaos. And, like, they have not been bad, which in MLS is normally a good thing. Like, we had a long NFL debate in our group, in one of our group chats yesterday, and it's like the worst thing you can be is in purgatory in the NBA and NFL salary cap leagues. That's not the case in MLS because there's no bottom out, get a first draft pick and move on. Like normally being competitive is worth it because accidentally you'll win and you'll get further into the playoffs every few years. Minnesota didn't feel that way over the last year because they had signed older players and it was all short term and it didn't feel like there was a future. They're not a club with a great academy. So where are you finding young players and the future and all of that? And a lot of that I think has switched over the last few months and I think should be pretty exciting. So that's my playoff push win. Do you have one?
Yeah, for me, it's Toronto 2-1 over Austin. Ooh. And again, the duality side of this, where like Toronto, this was low key, high key, a must win when you just kind of look at their schedule. They have kind of a brutal like 5 of their last 6 games that like they won't be favored in. So this was a huge win. So now they're 5 points ahead of Atlanta, above the playoff line, 3 points ahead of DC. So they're trying to hang on to host this play-in game. But again, being in the play-in game no matter what is a win for this team in this season where they were coming from, and they needed to have this game. The other side of that is Austin. They're cooked too. Like I think earlier in the season, I was saying this several times. Like, yeah, like Austin picked up a win here, and like I know that their fans, thankfully, were going after Doyle more than me. About like Doyle was being pretty loud about like this team isn't good. Like the XG and all this other stuff, and it's like congrats, like you got the 3 points, but like long term, I don't see this being sustainable. And I was kind of on that as well. They're just not a good team. It's like I don't know how many other ways to say it. And like I think now we can stop having that charade of, oh, are they going to make the playoffs? Oh, like, well, does that make them good? Oh, games I played in a spreadsheet, mate. Like they still won 3 points. Guess what? They had more goals than the other team. That's all the stat that matters. They're not a good team. And I'm not sure what they need to do in the winter. I think it's pretty clear that they need at least one more high level addition. And again, Bukhari like is somebody who like I do like the early signs in him. But like they need more. They need to find a way to either get the most out of Driussi or think about the future there. And like, like what does he want? What do they want? Like, again, I'm still going to always lean back to that's a very good player. And like, screw it. Let's try to figure out how to make it work. And I think Bukhari is somebody who makes sense with him in theory. But I think that they need another kind of high level player and then more, I guess, depth and rotation. And we'll see what happens. But Austin, I think I'm ready to close the book on them.
So what's funny is this game was the opposite for Austin. Their XG was off the chart. Sean Johnson was unreal in this game, and they could not score and could not finish. I think a lot of the questions that you just talked about, they go down to a number 9, and like if you need an elite one and what you need to do. Driussi is very style specific. Like he is not a high. He doesn't want the ball a ton, but he's not a number 9 that holds center backs. He kind of floats in between the two, and he was their elite goal scorer when they dominated possession and they just needed someone to finish those opportunities. It doesn't feel like they're moving that way with Bukhari. It feels like they're going to try and have a little bit more of a middle style to play and be able to stretch the field sometimes and play in possession sometimes. And so I think you're right. And like, he's really good, but he might be really good for you as an asset. And like what else he can bring into your team going forward for TFC. I don't think surviving against Austin is really at home is really like the trend you want going into these last few games. As you said, like a brutal stretch for them. Columbus, they go on the road to Colorado. They've got Red Bulls in Miami as well in this final stretch, and they have been easy to play against over the course of this time. But they've got star talent, and like that's what you want at this time of year. The question is if it can elevate itself. This was a good first step for them. And so on that, like, again, they no matter what, they needed to come away with 3 points here. Like, because there have been games where they've had better, like, either like a good performance and either maybe they drop the points or like this was like in a playoff situation of it doesn't matter how it happens, whether you need Sean Johnson to be the man of the match or if you need Austin to not finish well enough, like, needs the 3 points here, right? Because they're now 5 points ahead of Atlanta, and then there's Philly and Montreal 1.6, so 6 points off them total. They've played one more game than those other teams. Do you trust any of those other teams to make up a 5 to 6 point gap at this stage of the season? Philly, maybe, but I don't know. Yeah. Let's talk about Philly, because the biggest win for the Shield race was the win that ended the Shield race. Miami, in Lionel Messi's return, the bounce-back win. The Shield race, we are saying, is officially over? Over! Should I have made a lower third that said Shield race over? Congratulations, Inter Miami. It is over. Inter Miami, the win in Messi's comeback, 3-1 win against Philly in the end. 2 goals and an assist for Messi, at least 2 goals. I don't know about the assist. I don't remember the third goal right now. It was his assist?
Yeah.
Okay, 2 goals and assist for him. And Miami comes all the way back. Philly, of course, lost that game, so that's why I mentioned we can talk about Philly in a moment. I said on the show yesterday, I thought Philly played well. They had their chances, they had opportunities, they made it 1-1. They should have made it 2-2. They had multiple chances to do it. Okay, you could say on the one side it's Inter Miami, and like if Philly plays that way, they're probably fine against most other opponents. The other side is you don't really have that much time left, and you don't have that many points to drop. Let's start with Miami though, because you have to. The results without Messi are the reason they won the Supporters' Shield, which is incredible. Now he returns and you see everything. Like, it's not that hard to comprehend why they are the best team in the league. It is sort of surreal to watch at times. Even this weekend you watch and like, it doesn't feel like you can go back through and be like, oh, good signing here, team build. It's like a fever dream that this thing's just like happening all of a sudden. And then it's going to be over one day. But if you're a Miami fan, you've got to enjoy it for everything you can. I went to a barbershop yesterday in Miami with a full wall mural of Messi jumping into someone's arm in Inter Miami gear. The city is alight, man. This is why I'm here. I have brought the joy.
For those not watching on the stream, Goss has a chrome buzz cut. Right, his little fade got a little Miami cut.
I got my Joseph Martinez move.
The Kevin Sullivan move.
If I had anything.
So again, like, just to go back to the beginning point of what this category was, the Shield Race, when we were discussing this general segment, when you were like, oh, we can do biggest win for Shield Race, like, and I was like, dude, like, I don't think that's going to be a thing. I was like, the only reason that we're trying to talk ourselves into it being alive is because of the respect out of Columbus. Like, Shield Race was, for all intents and purposes, already over. And now, again, like, I think that's just common knowledge now. Again, it's not mathematical, but the conversation is, are they going to break the record?
Yeah.
And with 10 points off with 6 points to go. And they're pacing for it. And I'd be really surprised at this point if they don't.
So I would agree with you, because the reason that you would say, oh, they're not going to, is because Messi and Suarez being healthy for the playoffs is all that matters from this moment on. And yet they won 8 games without Messi in that stretch. So like
eight of 9. Crazy.
Right. So like in the conversation of, oh, I don't think they can break the record because they're going to keep themselves healthy, that may not matter for this team. I think midweek here is an interesting one because that's like a huge test for them. They're going at Atlanta, who we will talk about them sucking, but like it's on turf midweek. Like that's going to be a rotation game for this team, and they have their holes. Like the hole still exists with that Philly performance. You see the deficiencies on the back line. You see the opportunities out there. Drake Callender having a worse year than he did last year on some opportunities that he should make saves on, but also still capable of some big game-saving moments as well. So his performances have been up and down. The expectation, I think, at this point should be that Inter Miami set the record. Like, they have the depth, they have the know-how, and I think there's enough people in this group that are willing to carry this team when Messi's not available. Whether it's Busquets, even though it's not his best position, being willing to drop into the back line and play center back. Whether it's some of the other veteran pieces in central midfield that have stepped up in the big games without some of the stars. And Suarez, who's sitting on the verge of a double-double season in Major League Soccer in his first. And, like, if he stays healthy and plays this stretch, he might be the one who has the MVP numbers in the end for the best team in the league.
Yeah, so right now he's at 17 goals and 6 assists in just over 1,500 minutes. Like, Luis Suarez was one of my favorite players of all time. Like, we all know what he did for Gremio, and what, like, this surpasses, I think, any reasonable expectation for even the most optimistic Luis Suarez seasons here at this stage of his career. Even anybody who was like, of course, this is going to be an incredible signing. Do you remember in preseason when people were like, why did they even bother signing him? This guy sucks. Like, that was a thing, dude. Like, unreal. How was that a thing?
Because he used to play for Liverpool and everyone knows Liverpool sucks.
I don't want this to get lost in the sands of time. Like, that was the dumbest conversation of all, I think, in preseason. I can't even think of a second place right now. Like, oh man, they went to Saudi Arabia and played 7 games in 12 days or whatever the hell they did. And it's like, oh, Luis Suarez on one knee didn't score against some of these teams in midseason form. It's like, oh, he sucks. Like, why did they bother? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And the reason they're capable of signing these players is because there's the depth there of like Suarez was a risk because you don't know how many minutes he's going to play. And Messi, obviously, you didn't know how many minutes he's going to play. Copa America year, all those types of things. But they built out this roster in a way that they could buttress any of those issues. And they still have match-winning talent on the field in all of these games. They've got Leo Campagna as an option. They've got a ton of flexibility across the front line. Ryan Taylor, Benja Kromowski, whenever he's healthy. Like, they've just got a ton of options, and this is a deeper team than we have seen in Major League Soccer almost ever, and that's what's been able to keep them afloat in this conversation. On the flip side, Philadelphia, as I said, a strong performance. There's a lot of pieces in the team that have been good. To be able to put on this performance without Andre Blake, another big one for them, and you put a teenager in goal in a game like that, it's just a wild experience. But they head to NYCFC tomorrow night. They face DC and Atlanta at home. That's going to decide this for them, right? Those are the games. DC, especially Atlanta, one spot ahead of them. Like, those are the teams they're chasing. That's their opportunity. They have done enough to keep themselves in touching distance here, but they have to be almost perfect going through this stretch of games to put themselves really back into the playoffs. And I don't think it saves the season for this Philly team, but like, they're a team that if they get in, they've got more experience in these games than anyone they're going to play against for the most part outside of Columbus. And they've got success against most of these opponents. Like, I don't think that it should be acceptable. I understand all the complaints and like, this is a team that could have pushed on and didn't. But if you are sitting there right now, I think if you're Philly, say, just give us a shot. Like, just get us in the back door and let us cause chaos.
Yeah, and I think the other side of this, too, like, it's too late for them to be climbing forward. But, like, again, Miami, Cincy, Columbus, after everybody kind of sucks. Like, so, like, if Philly were in, like, 6, no, that would still line them up with Columbus. But, like, again, like, those teams below the top 3, I don't really have any time for it. And, like, you could be like, yeah, like, could Philly be the 4th best team? Maybe, because everybody else stinks too. Like, they all stink. Like, it's disappointing. It's frustrating. Like, we were talking about the strength of the Eastern Conference. Well, like, the top of the conference, like, that has held up. Red Bulls, NYCFC, Charlotte, like, all just very bad. Orlando's climbed the table a little bit, but they started off really bad. And you can poke holes in some of their wins if you want to be mean or really go with, like, a ruler here. So, like, okay, that wasn't a playoff team. That wasn't a playoff team. Like, it's just wide open beyond those 3 and like not wide open and this is super fun. It's like wide open and I don't really care because I'm not treating any of them as serious come playoff time.
So for Philly, if they are able to sneak up into the top of the play-in games and all of that, like Miami are a monster, although without Andre Blake, they went down there and performed admirably. If I'm Cincy, I want nothing to do with this team. They knocked me out of Leagues Cup. It was a pain in the ass in the playoffs last year. And I think if I'm Columbus even, you're not scared of anyone at any point. But, like, you'd rather play a DC United or an Atlanta in the postseason than deal with Andre Blake and, you know, Jack Elliott and Jakob Glesson, like all of this shit that has been there before and knows what they're doing and is comfortable in that spot. So I think those teams are going to be watching the bottom of the standings here and be like, I think Christian Benteke's got a couple goals in him. Like, come on, get a little cheering section for Moranchuk and this Atlanta team as well to see if they can turn things around, because that would be, I think, the story of that first round in the Eastern Conference. Let's talk about bounce backs.
Let me go first because I'll just be quick. It's Lionel Messi. He's back. Like, we haven't seen him in multiple months. 2 goals and an assist. Like, the question was whether he was going to play or not. Then, he's in the lineup. That's surprising. He's playing 90 minutes and he's dominating the whole time. Cool. Like, this is normal. He's got, 28 goal contributions now in, like, 1,100 minutes? It's insane.
Okay, that's fair. Now let me ask you this. Is it bounce back win or bounce back performance? What are we doing in this category?
Why do you ask so many questions on a podcast segment?
Because
the whole point of this is to be the eye of the beholder.
This is how I train. It was always like, we're doing this training game. If I stand in this corner next to this extra goal, can I just tap it in? That's how you win. That's how you win, Tom. It's not about playing the beautiful game.
You win by having a good podcast segment.
Nice. So I'm going to say performance then, and I'm going to say FC Cincinnati, even in a tie. We kind of went on for a while in the show last week saying, like, this is a chance to prove you're not the team that went on that losing streak. Lucho finally back in the starting lineup. Can you settle? Even without Miles Robinson, they went toe-to-toe with Columbus, It was a performance that looked like a team that could win the Eastern Conference. They weren't able to get the goal, although Lucho was close and showed you the quality in that finish, even with it being offside, like showed you why he's that MVP convo player and why he's the difference maker for them of when he's on the field and when he's not. So I thought for Cincinnati, it was a big weekend, even though you don't beat your rival at home. And it was like the sign they needed to say, bounce back, like we're still there. For straight up wins, it would be Montreal and Chicago because they literally bounced back from losing a lot of games to winning. I don't know how much I take from either of them. Like,
Yeah.
Charlotte have opened themselves up in their own way. Montreal jumps on them. The 2 early goals in back-to-back moments, like across 3 minutes. And then Charlotte was never really able to settle in that one. I think it's great for Montreal to see Bryce Duke score. I think it's great to see Caden Clark get some energy and
Excellent
score.
performance from Caden. Excellent performance. Like that's
Right.
the most important there.
But like, I don't watch that game. Also, this is Laurent Quartaz is going to change the entire starting lineup for the next game because that's all he's done over the course of this year. And I don't know that I watch that game and say like this is who they are going forward. They could build on a couple of these. It's big for Chicago. Give it to him, Tom Starlow, elevating against the New York Red Bulls. Come on, everyone's here for it.
I am everybody but Red Bulls fans. I'd imagine. Like I thought like so. Kalen Clark texted us like that Barlow scored. Like I was trying to catch up on everything. This was like after the festivals and like I just like breathed. Like again, we had 400 messages in the chat, and I was like, oh, that was just a joke. And then I looked at the scores. I was like, oh, good for him. That's awesome. Like goal. And like they were like. I didn't even notice that was a fixture going in. I was like, what's Galen talking about? So yeah, good for Chicago, good for Montreal. Again, particularly like what I would say for those, like we can go back to Montreal here. They need steps forward. They need some of these players that they signed, like Shaquille Marshall-Ruddy, and Caden Clark. Like a lot of these were upside plays, and the idea was, well, if we stink anyway, like let's get young, talented players. Roll the dice here, low risk on both of these guys. Let's see what they've got. And Caden Clark looked really, really good in this game. Like, it was poetic that on his goal, if you've seen the clip, like I think Doyle tweeted it, or if you go watch the highlights, or if you highlight, he tracked the ball over his shoulder on a through ball on the initial one and made a sweet connection with a volley. Like, that would have been the goal of the weekend if he put it in. So I was glad that in that scrum is when he ended up getting his goal. It's like a little bit of persistence and a little bit of just a lucky bounce, and I'm glad it fell back to him because he deserved a goal at the beginning of that play. So, again, he played really well, and that means more for Montreal right now than 3 points. And I don't know if Laurent Couture and the coaching staff would agree with that. I don't know even necessarily the fans would or wouldn't. Like, winning is super important even when the team's bad. But like for me, what I'm looking for more isn't whether they can beat Charlotte at home in September. It's like, okay, what are the building blocks? What are the pieces for next year?
I don't know that the fans care either way because the supporters group put out a statement after this game being like, this club's a mess and none of this is acceptable. I believe one of the supporters groups has like officially walked away as a supporters group for this team. And then the other one was like, this team refuses to acknowledge Montreal impact and come back to our history, as well as refuses to be competitive and invest.
You can't have both. You can't have both.
There's a lot of complaints out there where it's like you can hide behind one of them. You can't do all of them.
That's totally fair. And I'm 1,000% with the supporters groups on that one. Like, you can't suck and take away the Montreal impact.
Yeah.
You need to do one or the other.
It was
preferably neither. Preferably neither. But I'll accept one.
It was odd to see Joseph get the start and all of that. Of like, he's on $1.3 million. He's got an option for next year.
Who were they bidding against?
I don't but there's no way they re-up the contract, on that. So yeah, maybe you bring him back on a lower deal, but also like why? And so those are some of the weird things that are happening, I think, still with this team. But you also have to put a competitive team out there week in and week out. On the Caden Clark goal, if you watch from the beginning, it is one of the craziest moments I've ever seen. I think it's Tim Ream, but it might be Uranen. I'm not sure. Ball comes over the top, and they choose to head it back to goal. And they're so far away that Kalina actually has to come off his line and head the ball back away because he's not in his own box when he gets there. And then it's just like pure chaos going into Saliba's chip, Clark with the volley attempt, and then Martinez on the ground, Clark's on the ground. Like, the whole thing is chaotic moments. And I think it shows some of the tough moments that Charlotte's going through right now. Disconnected. I think Kerwin Vargas has moments for them, but like, they don't really have anyone in the box when he chooses to cross, and he's always choosing to cross. If that's the case, put BL out there, play another center mid who can actually cover ground and connect the game, and just accept the fact that you're not going to create a million opportunities, but you'll be more dangerous with the ones that you do. It feels like Vargas is playing a different game than everyone else. It's not super helpful right now for this team, and that's on top of how disconnected the backline is from the midfield. And that was the issue for this club for the first 2 years or year and a half that they were in the league before they started to stabilize things a little bit with Malanda and Privet in center back. So that's my only point on Charlotte. It's my only point. I just had the 1 point on Charlotte there. Let's get to our final segment here for the weekend recap. I titled it one way in the write-up. You can choose to call it whatever you want. It's your mea culpa moment. What do you want to call it?
Maybe I was wrong. Question mark. So we're not fully going in on that. But it's just hey, like sometimes you go off the cuff here, or like maybe we're going too strong on something that like, hey, maybe pull it back. So the one I'm going to start with here, because a great transition here. Maybe I was a little bit wrong about Charlotte. We spent a lot of time on this very distinguished program talking about Charlotte FC. And they have one win in their last 8 MLS games. And that stinks. That's very unfortunate. As you said earlier, the defense has not looked as good. During this time, their last 2 games, loss at home to Atlanta, really bad result. Loss at Montreal, really bad result. Draw against the New York Red Bulls at home, who are, they're not a playoff team without Emil Forsberg. That's where I'm at with that team. And the one before that, draw at Austin, who we kind of buried before. Not exactly a murderer's row of the fixture list right there. And no wins there. That's really disappointing. And after spending so much time of what could Swiderski be coming back, Pep Biel, I think, again, Tim Ream, I think that he has the potential to still elevate this team. But through, a month here, things are not going great. For Charlotte FC in terms of results. There's still time, but I feel like it's only fair that I come back and say, maybe I was a little bit too strong on the positive stuff.
This is your fault. You were wrong. Tommy Scoops takes the L with the Charlotte players. Sir Minty is standing left of the camera, I believe, or is it right of the camera? With the weapon faced directly at you, saying this is what you have to say. Do you have any more that you want to do? Because I've got one, sort of.
But you're not out yet. And the other one that I want to, the Stuart Armstrong sign with Vancouver. I do think that I went a little too strong and nothing matters if he's a DP that can't be bought down. He can't be bought down. I've done that reporting. But I kind of broke my own golden rule there of I can kind of question the process. I can question kind of the roster build. But if he's the right player, none of it matters. It does I can feel it would have been really nice if that was Max Tam, and it would have been really nice if this team spent more in ownership. Guess what? That's not a world we live in. Yeah. And so I think that I focused too much on the fact of I wish that they made a bigger splash, or I wish that they spent more money, I wish that that and without giving enough, I guess, credit to the player that maybe he could be. And again, I might be swinging too far back here in that he scored off the bench against San Jose at home,
which is everything.
But that reminded me, hey, maybe that was too strong to just completely write it off before you've seen how it is. I'm still leaning that way, but again, I would once again think that it's important to say, you know what, maybe that was a little too strong.
So we do this show twice a week, and when we do this show, I go into the studio where we record, and then this little thing pops up that says Tom Bogert is asking for access, and you have to let them in. If you look at the face of Ryan Gauld after Stuart Armstrong scored that, and the Scottish Brill love when they both recognized, and they were look at us, look where we are. That's how I feel every time Tom comes into this chat. It's let's effing go. Ryan Gauld was so happy in that moment, and the two of them were so dumb happy that they didn't know what to do with themselves, and they just started patting each other a ton and being we did it, and we're here. Yes, 5 minutes against San Jose at home off the bench, probably not enough to decide it. But to our credit, we did say on this show when the signing happened, it was better than not making the signing.
Yes.
Just a comment I'm going to make coming up about Carlos Vela. I don't think it's the right move because I dug through it this weekend, was thinking about stuff. It's okay for Vancouver to be oh, we're going to be a team that's solid, and we're going to leave space open to sit around and see what falls through for us. Stuart Armstrong's a good player. No one else made the signing. And I thought of Lucho Acosta and all of that. Like when he came back from Atlas, no one thought he was who he is. And anyone who goes back in revisionist history on Lucho Acosta pisses me off because people didn't think it when he first got to DC and people did not think it when he came back from Cincinnati. In saying all that, it still is a more ambitious signing than Stuart Armstrong. And they, I think, need to find a way to make these the TAM signings and be open to those DP signings of like, oh, this all fell through for you. We'll take you on and you can be a competitive piece here and maybe we'll flip you again in the future. But Vancouver is a better team today than they were before they signed him. And they've got a better chance at making a run in this playoffs than without him.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, again, I still think that the critiques are fair. I still think like I use that line that we're hammering home again, that they are better right now than they were if they did not sign Stuart Armstrong. I use that as a throwaway. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Whatever. And so I did not place enough emphasis on that. And like I was speaking to someone with better knowledge than me about how he fits in the group, what he's going to do, how he can connect, break lines, get the ball to goal, and like how the knock-on effect on Gauld that he'll be freed up to hopefully do more in the attack. And then it's like, oh, so that's part of the move is that not only do they believe that this is a very good player, but they believe that then it makes Gauld in whatever tier we had him, maybe that bumped him up another tier in that like, okay, he went from like just a really good DP to like, oh, is this like a match, like a bigger match winner, more of a, best 11 type guy rather than just like, oh, if he's your best player, how far can you go? And the other ones are Bouanga, Pooch, or whatever, you kind of going down the list, right? Like, so I don't think that I've given enough credit to that side of the signing, nor how he fits. So we'll see how it goes. This will be an even funnier clip if he's just not very good for the rest of the season. And I read so much into one finish against San Jose at home after they had been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs earlier than I think should ever happen in Major League Soccer.
I've got balloons. If you have to register 2 official mea culpas on Stuart Armstrong, both into the positive then back to the negative.
Hang on. You have so many follow-up questions about the rules of discussions in here, and now you've hijacked this into, this is an official, I was wrong, everything's over, it's done.
Yeah, we're going to make...
The whole point of this bit was, let's revisit, maybe I was too strong on that one. And now you're like, oh, it's an official Miyako. You use the word official.
Let me explain to you how you should do this. So mine is the LA Galaxy. The LA Galaxy fans decided that they were going to get up on the soapbox this weekend after their come-from-behind victory against LAFC, congratulations, and come after me because I said preseason that this team wasn't very good, that they weren't going to be super competitive, that they had huge issues, and that they were not going to be the return to the LA Galaxy that they are. And I'm going to stand by my take. And I am not going to step down. And that's how you handle the situation.
Absolutely no one.
I'm going to say this. I like to apologize. I didn't realize how bad the Western Conference was going to be this year. So I wasn't fully familiar with your game. And I was unprepared for the way this season would play out. And that's where I'm going to leave it. And this was sort of what I was alluding to when we talked about the Galaxy. They showed who they were in this game. And I don't know that you can run through the playoffs and make MLS Cup conceding twice in the first 20 minutes of every single game. And I don't know if you can run through the playoffs the way they are set up right now, being so committed to that one thing and not being perfect at it, right? Columbus is perfect at it. That's the bar. They have to get there. I don't think this team is there, and that might be a time thing. They need to be together and more cohesive for longer and be built through, have more players or players that sort of embody it even more going forward, or they might never get there. And most teams don't ever get there. And like the reality of Major League Soccer is outside of Columbus, most teams that play that way don't win MLS Cup. LAFC didn't win MLS Cup playing that way. And then they changed the way they played to go and win it and also brought in freaking Gareth Bale to come off the bench just to get over the line against Philadelphia at home. So I'm going to say that the door's still open, and thank you, Galaxy fans, for reminding me of all of that as we go forward. I think some of the other things I talked about were deficiencies at center back, deficiencies defending 1v1 on the wings, and deficiencies in goal. You saw all of that against LAFC. So I wouldn't say it's like the total victory package for them. Let's go cross town, though. Let's jump into our ice cream shop here. And you've got a little bit of additional details for us as we talk about some of the big moves in California. Let's start with Carlitos.
Yeah, so as is now official after I first reported that Carlos Vela has been re-signed by LAFC. A shock return. I think at this point I thought it was over. Talking to sources, I thought that there was kind of no chance this was going to happen. It did. And I interviewed LAFC's John Thorrington to kind of break down like, hey, how did this happen? What happened? Conversations had been kind of even passively ongoing for a while, even when I thought it was more informal was the word that John Thornton used.
So what was it like? Carlos throws up an IG of him at a pool, and LAFC officially responds and like, "Look sick. Let's talk later. Let's catch." Is it like when I'm like, we should grab lunch to people on IG and be like, "Where are you?" and never have an intention of seeing each other? Because like talks have been ongoing. Like it's September.
Yeah, that's and so that's kind of I was like, and they're like, no, like I mean, ownership as well. Like they want Carlos Vela to be part of this. So first, let me just get a couple details out of the way. He's not a designated player. They would have had to put that in the press release, and they did. And that was kind of, it was, you can read into what we didn't put in the press release. Personally, I don't know if teams have to signify if they use TAM on a signing or not, but that was not specified in the press release either. There's an option for 2025, and Thornton didn't want to get into any details financially over what, all kept saying, hey, something that made sense for Carlos, something that made sense for us. Their managing owner, Bennett Rosenthal, in the press release said, Carlos is important to the entire LAFC community. We simply would not be who we are without him. Thornton absolutely echoed that sentiment, kept coming back to it, said that they wanted him back the whole time. There's a reason why that they do the little like goodbye tweets to all the players. Like even Christian Teo was there for 3 months and played 110 minutes. Yeah, and my significance of that is that like, they try to treat things that way. Like that is an ethos of the club. So it was conspicuous that even as there were no serious conversations with Carlos Vela, they were not closing the door on that. Ownership obviously wanted him back. They were vocal about that. They were involved at the club, all of that. But at the end of the day, they believe that he's going to help this team in 2024. Me personally, I hope that he's still there for 2025, so we don't have to do this all over. Club option. And maybe his pal Antoine Griezmann will be around as well. Who knows? Like one thing that I find interesting here, and I think from the outside, because of some of the difficult decisions that LAFC have had to make, like it's really difficult to be sentimental and how much that kind of values into some of these decisions. In a salary cap league, it's like the old trope. It's not personal, it's business. Like things aren't that black and white in sports and club cultures and fans, all of that stuff, right? Like, and I kind of like asked Thornton that, and he's like, I'd push back. He's like, I don't know how to be anyway. Like, I am an emotional person. He's like, there are some GMs in all sports that try to put up a barrier between them and the locker room so that it's easier to, like, when a tough decision has to be made, you can take the emotion. He's like, I can't do that. And he goes like that is something that, like, we want Carlos Vela to be part of this club. Like, we want there to be a proper goodbye. Like, that's all. Like, he didn't like I was like, how do you kind of not quantify? Like, how does that play into it? Or like, are you happy now that everything like had to make sense on the field, had to make sense financially, everything else? But like now that it's all done, can you like lean into? He's like, no, like he's like, I can't strip that away when I'm making these decisions. So things are obviously very difficult. Again, on a romantic side, I'm thrilled that this deal got done. I'm honestly very, very surprised. I wrote an article about what's going on with Carlos Vela probably 6 weeks ago, a month ago, something like that. I wrote that article as like this is over. I think this is over. Like, and he's just maybe never going to announce his retirement because Carlos is Carlos. He does whatever he wants, and I love that about him. Like, but that was the impetus behind that article, was talking to enough sources to be like, I'd be shocked if this happened, and it happened. And hey, man, sometimes sports are cool.
Yeah, I think for fans, it's fun. Like, it's a cool thing to happen. I said yesterday, like, I don't think it's going to be a meaningful difference in the soccer and on the team. And I can understand the, like, veteran presence, who he's been. He has been everything you want him to be as a locker room member, as a leader, as a captain since the club's been founded. So anything him coming back into the locker room is positive. There are also other ways to do those things. Like, you can have coaches and assistant coaches and club ambassadors and technical staff. Like, there are other ways to bring a person back into a club and have them be around it. I'll be interested to watch Vela play and see if he has anything left to give this team. It's really hard to think he does with all the time off and like no preseason, not getting back into things after the player we saw leave. I'd be surprised if he does, but as you said, there's like a ton of off-field and sentimental stuff here that the spot's open. So it's their money and it's not being used on anyone else. And the roster freeze has already occurred. So like, you might as well bring him in. As I said, with the Stuart Armstrong thing, like, you're not worse than you were yesterday before you had Vela. I don't know that you're much better, but you're not worse than you were over there. And it is funny to hear the sentimental side, because this is a club where, like, they win MLS Cup, no money for Chicho Arango. See, Atuesta helps them get off to a great start. Okay, we're going to ship you out now. Zimmerman, the same. Like, they have done that consistently, and they're not wrong for it, but it's funny to hear then the other side would be like, oh, that's not really who we are. And now it feels like Vela is different than all of those people,
yes.
right? Vela is the club. He was the founding player for a reason. So much of what they've done off the field and on the field has been built around him. I mean, you go to LAFC games, for anyone who's never been, like, it is a Mexican culture. Like, when you are in the stadium, they're playing Mexican music consistently. It's a huge part of the fan base. It was something that the club leaned into. A lot of that's because of Carlos Vela and, like, who he is and what they wanted to be in bringing him in as a player. And a lot of it's what San Diego is trying to mimic right now in Chucky Lozano and all of that. But it's hard to imagine something being equal to Vela. Then he goes out and he puts up some seasons in which you say he is one of the greatest MLS players of all time and won trophies for that club. So he is not Chicho Arango. He is not Walker Zimmerman. He is not Eddie. Like, he's singular in what he means to that club and always will. And as you said, it will be cool to see him go out in the right way with them. Let's talk San Diego as well.
I was just going to say, I would say one fair pushback in case people are listening to this and talking out loud to themselves. If sentiment was a really big part of this, he would have been back in February.
Right.
Not right. Like, so again, it was at least something that not played a part. Like, I don't want to misconstrue his words, but if you're sitting at home or walking your dog or in your car or at the gym being like, if this was so important, why didn't they do it in January, February, or March? That's fair, right? I think that's just as far where I'd put that.
All right, take us down the coast. Let's talk San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego officially hired Mikey Varas. I got to take some time with sporting director Tyler Heaps and Mikey Varas himself, and spoke with them this morning. One of the questions I asked Tyler Heaps was, hey, like, and from our conversation with Bobby Warshaw, I was like, oh, I'm very curious. How did you go from, like, who is interesting? How do we get 100 names and bring them down to 10? He laughed and was like, come on, don't you know how? Like, I listened to the Bobby Warshaw interview.
Nice,
like,
let's go.
I was like, that's why I asked.
Soccerwise fans, baby. What's up, Tyler?
But, like, he laughed, like, no, like, like, Bobby, that's how teams do it, right? Like, that's kind of like they have their pillars of, they wanted somebody obviously with youth development, somebody who sees the game the same way that they do. So everything is going to kind of be aligned. The two men seem very aligned in Tyler Heaps and Mikey Varas. One of the things that Mikey Varas told me that I found super interesting is that he was looking into San Diego probably the same way San Diego was looking into him. Like, he was like, I was doing my research and stuff, and he goes like, I wanted to be a part of this in some way. And he's like, I told Tyler that in an interview. And, like, he's like, if I didn't get the job, I wanted to consult. Like, right. He's like, I wanted to be involved in some way, because he's like, I think that they're doing it right and all this. The other interesting nugget that Mikey Varas gave me, like, that I followed up on to make sure I had it absolutely correctly, he was like, I wouldn't have left in ahead of a home World Cup for something that I didn't feel was absolutely the perfect job. And I was like, when you say that, do you mean that you would have been on Mauricio Pochettino's staff? And he was like, there were discussions for that, yeah. And reading into it, I'm assuming that he had a pretty good idea he would have been on the staff if he wanted to continue with U.S. Soccer. So the fact that he's leaving before the home World Cup, like, Mikey Varas is a name that's been in the mix in coaching searches over the last couple cycles. I think that he would have had an offer from somewhere else within the next 18 months, probably, if not as soon as this winter. He was one of those guys that made sense. Oh, he's going to be one of the next candidates. Oh, he's going to be one of the next candidates. So it's not a situation where, crap, there's 30 of these. Whatever's offered to me, I got to take it. Like, I think Mikey Varas knew that there would still be options. So the other side of this, too, is that, like, he's really bought into the club, and he feels that this is a vision that fits what he cares about as well. And so from the beginning, everybody's in lockstep, and I'm really excited to see how the San Diego roster comes together, how this game model comes together, and what Chucky Lozano looks like under Mikey Varas, because Mikey Varas was like, he has the ability to be the best player in the league, and it's on me to put him in the best positions to succeed.
Okay. I think for Varas, it makes a ton of sense, right? He comes from Sacramento, FC Dallas in the U20s. Like, if you're talking about youth development background and you want a club that's going to value that, I don't know that anyone will more than San Diego. And that's the Right to Dream connection and what they're building, and then to do it with his now tentacles of like, I've worked across Texas and the Southeast, and I've worked across NorCal and into the Pacific Northwest and across, when you work with a club like Sacramento, you're talking about the Vegases of the world, and you're going into Arizona and all of that. And that's what Right to Dream has said. Like, they want to cast a wide net and get the best young players to come and play for their club. He makes sense for all of that. I think if you're him and that's what you believe in, you need to have guarantees that the club's going to stand behind you, right? Because what we've seen in Major League Soccer is, we believe in this, but we don't want to lose games. So, like, we believe in this to this extent, and then you either need to start winning now or we're going to fire you. And so I think if he feels like this is the club that's going to be behind him, as they look like and as he's probably found from all this research, that's where it becomes like a really special opportunity, plus the area. If you're going to try and develop young players, Southern California, not a bad place to do it. Mexico border, not a bad place to do it. And through Right to Dream, not a bad place to do it. I think there's a lot that makes sense here. You've got a little bit of MLS experience, that know-how. And for him, there's not only just like, there's 30 jobs and how many are there? You get a chance to launch something new and do something special. Like, we talk about Carlos Vela, you talk about Bob Bradley in the same breath, right? To launch something new, to do it at a high level, to do it in a special way. Tata Martino as well. Like, there are only so many chances like that in the world because most leagues don't have new clubs coming through. And so I think that's a big part of this as well. I'm glad to hear that they're listening to us. We're going to try and guide them along the way in their expansion bid. We're going to try and help them build out their roster as they go forward. We've got some fun stuff planned. Maybe we'll pull Bobby back in to get some more segments.
Now this sounds like super self. I was bringing that up to like laugh about like, yeah, man, like didn't you already answer that question?
I know.
Not like, they listened to our show. Didn't mean it like that.
Too bad, Tom. That's the way I took it, and that's where I'm going with it. Now talk about Junior Moreno. I don't know why.
That deal's done. I just that came on the roster freeze day as well. Junior Moreno to Houston Dynamo. He was really, really good for Cincinnati. Then his contract expired. He ended up going to Saudi Arabia. Before Cincy, he worked with Ben Olsen in DC. I really like this signing. I honestly didn't know that he was a free agent. I thought he was still at his club in the Middle East.
You didn't, because we did a show where we talked about free agents and available signings, and I brought him up.
Okay.
So maybe you need to go talk to Tyler Heaps and be like, hey, have you listened to Soccerwise recently? Anything interesting been said?
The point of that was to say, I'm shocked that it came all the way down to the roster.
Yeah,
the roster
that no one else in MLS made
player,
this move
man.
is surprising. Yeah.
Or like, and again, maybe people tried, maybe the money didn't line up, or maybe he didn't think the project whatever was the right one. But I think it was a really good signing by Houston, and a low-key one that came through on a Friday evening, came through right after the Carlos Vela news, so it probably got buried a little bit for people outside of Houston. But this is a very good signing.
Don't they know that you had a Bruce concert this weekend and to like not make news and do stuff?
The Vela and the Moreno scoops came Friday night, so the concerts were Saturday, Sunday.
All right, we thank you for respecting the sanctity of Bruce in New Jersey, in Asbury Park. Yeah, Junior Moreno, he's an MLS player. So like, if you're Houston and you get stuck with injuries, you want to protect Ache down the stretch. They did this with Jan Gregus as well. It worked fine. They've done it with Latif. They're trying to build in the back end of their roster, and I think they've done a good job with it going forward. Anything else here?
That's it.
All right, let's talk Houston. They play Vancouver. I think that's the best game of Wednesday night. And like I just said, they've looked really good over this stretch. They destroyed RSL at home. There was like a 7-minute period where RSL scored. They cut it to 2-1. It looked like it could be 2-2. And then Houston was able to gain control of the game and be able to get their claws in it and finish it off. Ponce looks connected. He looks dangerous. He looks different than the rest of this team. In our whole underrated thing, I said we couldn't say Artur because he'd done so much, but he's one of the best in the league at what he does. Mikael, another strong performance from him in winning, I think, most of the battles with Chicho Arango and forcing RSL to play a little bit deeper. That's like a tough matchup, I think, for Houston. They have now beat LAFC and RSL, which are two teams that I think are set up to beat them, of like, can hit you in transition, can hit you from direct balls, especially from deep wide areas where they often leave people exposed and can get beat 1v1 at the center back position. This is a really good stretch for Houston, in saying that Vancouver's another team that's set up that way, that wants to play direct, that wants to play in transition. And this is going to be the one that I have on the big TV for this Wednesday night.
Yeah, I think it's obvious, and we joked about the lack of top quality games. Yeah, Houston, Vancouver is definitely going to be the best one. I'm really excited to watch it again. Houston have been really, really good lately. Again, they've probably flown under the radar because of where they are in the standings, and they're where they are in the standings because of it was a slow start at the beginning of the season with injuries, everything else. This is a team that's going to be the best version of themselves heading into the playoffs.
Yep.
And that's kind of what you want in the timing. And, like, yeah, now they're sitting in 7th. They're 3 points off 3rd place. They're 4 points off LAFC in 2nd place, though I don't really believe that they're going to fall off. But, hey, it's possible because they have a game in hand on some teams around them. But, like, they could very quickly be working into that hosting round 1. And, like, I think that that's pretty low-key because they've been flying under the radar. And they've been playing some really good soccer. And Houston Dynamo are peaking at the right time.
Here's your roster read. They go after this game, or roster schedule read. They go to Austin and Seattle. They host New England. They go to St. Louis. And then they finish the year at home against the LA Galaxy on decision day.
I feel like that's like every year kind of thing.
Yeah, it is.
LA
That's true.
Houston
That's
on
tradition.
decision day.
Yeah.
This is football heritage.
Yeah. And RSL doesn't play and sits at home and waits to see what happens. That's the nature of the game and the nature of the beast. But it's a good stretch for Houston to close on. As you said, they are trending at the right time. They look really good going into the postseason. And now you can say, like, we've seen it before. We can trust this team in the playoffs. Yeah. I think they trust themselves in big games and big, like, must-win moments. And that's really exciting. And then you add in that little bit of addition of talent. And I talk about this a lot of, like, you can see the stress in players when they don't feel like goals are coming in their team. Like, you can watch teams play and you can see the panic in, like, I have to hit everything when it bounces out to me. I have to keep peppering the goal. It doesn't feel that way with Houston because I think partially because of Ponce and what he's brought in. I thought Coco looked awesome this weekend, and you saw a level of that of, like, Coco wasn't shooting from distance as much. He was head down creating, knowing that chances were going to come for him and the team, and, like, that's where he's at his best. Bossy looks really good again as well. So this is going to be a fun one to watch. Curious to see how many minutes Armstrong has in him and where Vancouver chooses to use him because they've got a lot of pieces to move around. I already sent the warning shot to my TFC friends. That was like, Ralph Priso, back-to-back starts, another Toronto-based player who might succeed with another club. Watch out. But we are far from that one. We talked a little bit about Atlanta, Miami. Atlanta were one of the big losers of the weekend. They got played off the field by Nashville. And I believe Jean De Silva came out with an injury in the first half as well, so something to note for them. They couldn't get near anyone in central midfield. Hani dominated the game. They continued to play behind the fullbacks and were able to attack the center backs. So a lot for Atlanta to try and clean up here for this midweek game as they're in must-win territory. And I don't know, is this a rivalry? Potentially, who knows? But whatever it is, Atlanta doesn't have a lot of space to waste here, and they've got to try and take a shot.
I don't have much to add.
There you go.
No, like, I don't think that they're very good. They're playing this is much more about Miami chasing the points record to me than anything from Atlanta. Like we've had the conversation about Atlanta so many times about, for this, whatever. Like, just that loss to Nashville, I think, does it for me. Like, mentally with them, not that I thought that they were a threat in the East before that, but it's like, they haven't shown much of anything to point to of like, hey, maybe they have a real chance here. Maybe it's something like, hey, maybe any given Sunday, right? Anything can happen on any game. That's about as best as I can do.
Any given Wednesday, as you call it.
Midweek.
Let's close out with this one. So TFC hosting Columbus. That's an interesting one. We said TFC trying to...
Columbus are going to score 19 goals if Toronto defends the way that they did against us.
And Toronto needs to beat a good team at some point to prove themselves. NYCFC hosting Philly. What, Toronto? No, we just said with the schedule they have left, they're going to have to beat someone decent to make the playoffs. Like, they have no choice.
Honest to God, I'm not sure if Atlanta are going to... The combination of DC, Atlanta, Philly, that two of them are going to make up 6 points.
Well, so Philly travel. Yeah, Philly travels to NYCFC. Jack Elliott suspended on yellow cards for that one. That's going to be a big one as well. But I want to close out with this one. Orlando hosting Charlotte. Orlando... They are in an interesting spot. They get back-to-back 3-0 wins. On the one hand, you say great. On the other hand, you look at things. Their last 4 matches, basically since the break, they've drawn NYCFC. They lost at SKC 3-0, and they beat Nashville and New England at home 3-0. Better to win than not. The necessary points are in there. I think these are 2 teams where I'm asking who's the real version. Charlotte, we talked about already. And Orlando are in there as well of like, are they for real? Are they competitive? Are they closer to the team they were last year than the team they've been most of this year? And I think this is an interesting one to decide it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But even then, like, I think that if they win, we could poke holes in what Charlotte has been. Like, again, we were just very kind of critical of them Orlando's last 7 wins. New England, Nashville, New England, DC, Toronto, Chicago. Maybe they're not good.
Yeah.
Like, again, it's better to win than to not win. But, like, looking at this stretch, like, we could be, if we get towards deadline day, decision day, or we get to the playoffs and, like, they just get stomped by a good team, it'll be really easy in hindsight to be like, they weren't any good at all. It was just a good run. And then coincidentally, like, if they do continue turning on, they do prove that, like, it's like, oh, no, they definitely a flip switched at this date when Martino Ojeda went to 10, and obviously they were good. So I think this is one of those where, like, in hindsight, we're going to look back and be like, oh, it was obvious, wasn't it? But, like, I don't think it is, and I think that this is a team to closely watch down the stretch.
If Rafael Santos is going to score bangers, then it's there. Best goal scorer in the league, some say. It is going to be a fun one this weekend, and we'll be back on Thursday to recap it all, to review it all. Whether we're saying they're the best matchups or not, I think a lot of these results are going to decide playoff spots for these teams where it's 3 points you can't afford. Be interesting to see who's got the depth to come out midweek to put out the performance they need to, as well as who's got the professionalism to get over the line in games like this. Midweek is always wacky. It's always a little bit crazy. And that's what we love here at Soccerwise. So we're going to be back on Thursday to talk MLS. I'll be back tomorrow with Jordan Angeli to talk NWSL as well. Thank you to all of you for listening. Shout out to everyone in the chat, to you, Tom, and we'll talk to you all again very, very soon.